And let's check out this. People said this is a pretty nice video, so let's see what it's got in store.
You've triggered my trap card, the magical hats. In this series, myself and 3 of the top Yu-Gi-Oh streamers will give their unfiltered, uncensored, and uninformed takes on some of Yu-Gi-Oh's most pressing issues.
Thanks for the invite, by the way.
One of these 4 has a fake take, and it's up to the rest to find the liar. It's time to play Magical Hats.
That's such a cool idea, though. I like that idea. So it's like, wait, 4 of they are just hosting a regular Yu-Gi-Oh discussion, but one of them has like a fake opinion or like a weird opinion, and they have to spot who it is. Is that how it works? Okay, we're gonna spot the imposter.
Easy. And welcome to the inaugural episode of Magical Hats. I have 4 of Yu-Gi-Oh's top creators in this call. And then after Alex couldn't make it, we settled on Gage. How are you all doing? Are you excited to reveal your terrible takes?
Extremely, Joseph. You know I'm the king of bad takes, bro.
I really do. I do. We won't be able to tell if you're lying.
I like that you're self-aware now, Gage, honestly.
My takes are never bad. I'm always right. I'm literally always right. All the time. Never wrong. Lots of hair. Good streamer. Yes.
I have never said an incorrect thing in my entire life, so let's
True.
get down to business.
You've said BA is playable every format since 2015.
Is he wrong?
Hey, playable's not a stretch, bro. He may be right.
All right, let's kick things off. Today we are talking about the time rules, one of the hottest topics in Yu-Gi-Oh! Everyone feels like they have to dip their own opinions into the pie that is the slurry of Twitter. And while we still have that platform, let's rattle off our takes as well. Kevin, you want to go first?
Sure. Okay, so in my opinion, the time rules as they currently are awful. Despite the fact that I think they're better than 0, 1, 2, 3, I think that these time rules allow for a very unhealthy state of competitive
he's not the
play in
imposter.
the sense that these time rules promote, you know, intentional slow play. Not that everyone does it, but some people definitely do. And it also makes games that would be otherwise unwinnable for certain people become winnable through milling a ladybug with a skull on its back. And then all of a sudden you just randomly win a game. As a whole, right now, I think these time rules are...
I also have a take on the time rules that has changed a little bit over time. No pun intended. But we're gonna let them finish, and then I'm gonna give you my take on the current time rule situation that we are in,
complete, like,
which might surprise you a decent amount.
A strong statement. Nadir, what you got?
I'm somewhere a little bit more in the middle, I suppose. I think initially when everyone first heard of it, and as absurd as it does sound, end of phase is quite a wrong restriction, but over the course of time, at least definitely for the more casual level, at locals, at regionals, over the last couple of years, people have probably absolutely noticed that they were designed to reduce tournament duration, and I think that's absolutely been achieved. Now the question and the crux of the argument comes down to what cost have tournaments become more efficient. Now, at the YCS and Premier event level, I would argue that, in fact, it's not had that effect. I don't know why, but at the regional local level, it has done what it was intended to do. And I think for the most part, best case and proof of this is YCS Dortmund ended at midnight.
This is a very good point, and I think I can explain it. I think I can explain it because, I mean, the whole idea behind it was that I think they wanted to smoothen up tournaments, right? They wanted to make it possible to run tournaments faster, right? And now the reason why I think that works at locals or maybe even regionals is because people don't care enough, might be the wrong take, but like, or the wrong way to put it. But I think if you're going into time at a locals or a regional tournament, you're gonna have a way smaller chance of weird situations happening where one player wants to win so badly they do some weird stuff and like it ends up in a huge judge call. Which, to be clear, I think that's the problem at YCSs. I think that's why this thing doesn't really help reduce the round time in YCSs, is because people just argue a lot more than they used to, and that is ultimately where they lose all the time that they would save otherwise. But also, I think one other thing that I just recently had is, like, at locals and regionals, I just think they don't have many deck checks, right? they don't have that many deck checks or that frequently. And if you think about it, like deck checks at YCSs can significantly hold up the tournament, because if they get like if one match gets like a 15 to 20 minute deck check, and then those are the ones that go into time, they just hold up the entire tournament by 20 minutes, right? No matter what they do, even if they finish right at 0, right when their clock hits 0, they still hold up the tournament by 20 minutes.
That is unprecedented and something that hasn't happened for years. So overall, I think that the time rules are a negative. They kind of promote a whole other different playstyle that I don't think is conducive to a healthy environment, and I don't think was really ever intended for the way Yu-Gi-Oh to be played. So I think it promotes a sort of style and strategy that's never really been a thing in Yu-Gi-Oh, I guess maybe since like Chainburn, which hasn't been a deck for like almost 10 years.
That won 2017 Nats, right?
Yeah, that was, I guess, 5 years ago. So yeah, half a decade.
Oh wow, that's, now I'm old.
That wasn't Nats.
My
That
man's
was
talking about-
Worlds, by the way.
My man's talking about time.
Is this how long we've had these time rules? Is it 6 years now? Is it this long?
Time cards. He's been milling Barbar since it's come out.
Yeah, baby! Nightmare Shark for game.
I feel like I'm kind of in the minority on this one, but I like the time rules. I mean, I don't know if any of you were
Impostor.
alive
Sorry.
for
Yeah,
that.
he's the imposter.
I don't know if you all were living when we had the old time rules, but you can pack a lot of game into even a single turn. I think Farf is right. Events do run late, but only really at big events. Nowhere near the like hour-long in time like sessions we had in the past. I also have to differ with like the Skullmark Ladybug stuff. I think that it's now that it's become standard to play cards for time, it's actually super funny seeing like garbage cards like Scattershot become top tier playable. And it also helps like cards that have a life point cost, like Sprite Starter, actually feel like you're paying a cost instead of just this like weird detour that no one actually cares about. I do think that there is a problem insofar as the time rules have not really shaved too much time off of events, but I feel like the solution to that is to shave even more time off of time. So like maybe instead of like end of phase,
okay.
which honestly,
So the game is to find out who has the weird take, but then you just start the video by dropping the weirdest take known to mankind.
like if you're playing tier, could be another 10 minutes. They do something like end of current chain. Like it's over. Get to the open game state.
That's
like,
a scroll
fire it
point
off.
take.
But no, in general, I think that the new time rules have been a net positive. I think.
Did you just say that's a Skrelp take?
No, in general, over. Get to the open game state.
That's
like,
a scroll
fire it
point
off.
take.
But no, in general,
Yeah, I mean, that
think
is
that
a
the
Skrelp take. He's not wrong.
new time rules have been a net positive. I think it incentivizes a different type of strategic gameplay, but not one that's necessarily bad. And I think that stuff like Skullmark Ladybug becoming playable is funny enough that it justifies the whole thing.
Would you say earlier strong take? that's one of those ones.
Bold word.
What about end of the current breath that you take? Would that be a good one?
My God.
All right, what you got, buddy? What you got?
All right. Well, I mean, I'm actually kind of on your fence, Joseph. I think like most Yu-Gi-Oh players, like
Okay,
they
now,
just
who's the
genuinely
imposter
wanna
now?
Play Yu-Gi-Oh, right? 45 minutes has proved like ample for most players, but it's like challenging for a lot. And I think actually it's not necessarily due to like just the time rules in general. I think it's because of how these YCSs have been queued up recently. Like if you look at Hani's Pasadena side deck, it's like the perfect example of somebody that just wants to play 45-minute games. And he knows he can do that because he's confident enough to be able to play it. But I think a lot of the problem isn't the time rules itself, but approaching these events, they are on like release weekend. And it might not seem like a problem like on these regional levels because you may not see it there, but at these YCSs where they have these huge monumental game releases, it's challenging for a lot of players that didn't physically get the cards like before. I think a lot of like time.
What does that have to
recently
do with
for
time
matches
rules?
has been explaining what my cards do to my opponents rather than just focusing on the game at hand. It's like not anything new explaining like your
that.
cards to your opponent, but when you're explaining like half of your deck to like everybody in the room that you sit down next to, it becomes challenging. And that's another thing too is like Konami's, it's silly to say it, but they've been generous with giving us that 5 minutes. It actually like matters a lot.
Well, now I'm confused. I thought no one would agree with my harebrained take, and it would be easy to suss out who the imposter was.
I just want to get everyone's opinion. Well, mostly I want to get Nadir's opinion. How would you, if you could, fix the time rules?
Yo, I don't think it's even reasonable to say end of phase and be okay with that. I think it's unreasonable, so I'm immediately sussing those two. So I think any rational person would say end of turn, current turn, minimum. Probably end of opponent's turn would be like ideal.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. From a lot of people that I've personally spoken to, that's what a lot of people say. I kind of want to hear what Joseph and Gage have to say about like what their counter argument would be to making the time like go until end of opponent's turn or something like that.
That's an entire game you're describing.
I mean, you went completely to the extreme and went with end of chain link. I don't know if you're joking.
That I don't know about that. That's the one thing that's got me off guard. But as for like end of turn, I still think there's a lot of like parts of the game that wouldn't matter if you have like your main phase
I heard I was wanted. You are always wanted.
2 and we're saying the end phase, right? Like sometimes games end if I just go battle phase and poke you, right? But what's stopping me from going to my end phase and still being up on life after I went to battle phase?
It means you can't win with like scattershot, but you can still win with Hayate. Like, oh, cool.
Can you still not win with scattershot though? I'm saying like if I'm still under the premise that I'm winning being up on life at the end of the turn, right? It is my main phase 1. I'm diddling around doing some combo and then I scattershot you, right? Okay, end phase. I won, right? Like, does it matter?
Alternative to this, what if time is called at a turn and you go until the end of the battle phase of that turn? Thoughts?
That doesn't solve anything
Nah,
either.
I think it's still crazy.
I would like to focus on catching the imposter here, so I'm gonna use my round 2 here to catch someone out. I think Joseph is very clearly sus, but the thing that's catching me off is that Gage is defending this quite strongly, and your arguments are really poor. So in your opening presentation,
How is that suspect for game?
It's funny how MBT and Gage both could easily be the imposter, and the truth is just one of them is actually the imposter and the other one is just being weird.
So in your opening presentation, Gage, you said that you went on this strange sort of fixation on, well, it's like a new weekend and a new set, and people like are explaining and reading their cards. I think for the
See, this is an actual issue, but it has not much to do with the time rules, because that's an issue regardless. It's like it can be really annoying because Yu-Gi-Oh is so complex and so complicated, and like when you're playing a deck and your opponent doesn't know your cards, it's it can be super frustrating to play that match, because they just like it's gonna drag so unnecessarily long because they need explanations on the cards, because you can't play the freaking game if you don't understand your opponent's cards.
majority of people who are entering major tier 2 events and higher, they are prepared and they are there to play those new core sets that are defining the format. So I find it really weird that
Well, that is not actually true. Like that, it does not always happen like that. Like literally, I've had opponents at like YCSs where I like Runic, YCS Utrecht. Like there's literally multiple people, even in later rounds, that I had to explain the Runic cards to. Like that happens.
you fixated on this argument
And it's
about
weird.
explaining and reading cards. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I totally disagree. Did you watch the live stream from Pasadena? If you sit down and watch the coverage, you realize how many people just didn't get enough time to understand what these cards do. There's illegal plays flying all over the place. There's people just don't fucking know what the cards do and everything like that. I've seen, the entire weekend in Pasadena, I saw people getting absolutely roasted for just not understanding maybe what one little new card did that came out. It's genuinely a challenge.
I think there's a difference between proficiency and misplaying and like this sort of like, explaining what cards do. I don't think it's ever that level of incompetence. You were very strong on this argument that like, people need time to like read these new cards, like physically sit and read how these new cards function, which is not.
Okay, so what Gage is saying is basically the expected time that you need for a match in Yu-Gi-Oh can sometimes differ from time to time, because it also depends on how well your opponent is familiar with your cards. If I'm sitting down across to someone that doesn't know my cards, the expected time that we're gonna need to play a match is longer than what I would normally expect, right? And that is something to take into consideration with time rules or the rule set itself, right? It's like, in my opinion, it's a weird situation, because like on the one hand, everyone entering a big tournament is responsible for knowing what's going on. But on the other hand, like, what are you doing? What are you doing in that spot exactly, right? What do you do if you're sitting across someone who doesn't know what your cards do? Like, you immediately like friggin' like not tell them what your cards do? It's weird.
Not the case at a tier 2 event, I think, but maybe
it does happen.
I could be giving the Yu-Gi-Oh player base too much credit.
Disagree. I had people reading a Yugioh. They were like, "Let me read a Yugioh now for the first time."
Okay.
I think you are vastly overestimating how competitive their general Yu-Gi-Oh player is.
In Gage's defense, I personally was like preparing to commentate like on my stream this YCS. I read every Ishizu card the night before. Prior to that, I had never read them. So I can genuinely see people pulling up to these events.
Kevin, I feel no offense. I feel like you're a special case, and you aren't actively playing the game right now for certain reasons.
That's fair. That's very fair. Yeah, no, that's not wrong. Not wrong. I will give you that one. But I've definitely rocked up to like tier 2 events and whatever. Like everyone was on that like Predaplant deck when I pulled up to Hartford, and I had never read a single fucking Predaplant card except for Verte and Scorpio.
Okay, Joseph, who do you think it is?
It's so weird. It's strange because like Kevin went really hard in, I went really hard in. I feel like Gage went really hard in. Nadir's take was kind of lukewarm, but it's the only one I feel like he doesn't actually believe in. I think that, you know, time rules are super good is like a weird, strange, off-meta Gage take that I would not be surprised if he has. I think that, you know, whatever side Kevin lands on, he's just going to defend to the death. And I know it's not me because I was in electrical and I was doing the task where there's the circle rotating. So I think it has to be Nadir just by process of
I
elimination.
think it's me. Interesting.
I think it's actually like Kevin's argument.
Whoa!
Was super. No. Listen, bro. It was super generic, bro. Like you're like.
Okay. This has to be scripted. This has to be scripted because clearly it's Gage or MBT. Those are the only two with
Just
even
like,
remotely
man,
unreasonable takes.
It
people
could have
that win
come
with
from
these
Twitch
time
chat.
cards.
You are right.
Which
It
means
coulda
that
came
either
from any-
MBT
it
or
was
Gage is
super
an idiot.
generic. I feel like it just wasn't really wholly something.
Because MBT is calling out Nadir and Gage is calling out Coder. Which is like... No!
He would believe.
That is exactly how Kevin talks. Come on, that's dog shit, bro. Like,
You're able to mill. I can't believe you're able to mill this ladybug in this game. I can't even play and win.
That is absolutely. Do you not know how salty I am, dude? Like, if someone would mill a ladybug, bro, I'd flip the table. Fuck this, you know?
You salty? No.
so you think it's Kevin, Gage?
I don't know, man.
Nah, could not be me.
I have. I don't know, man. I have a feeling it could be Kevin.
It
In all
has to
honesty, I
be. It
definitely
has to be MBT or Gage because I don't want to live in a world where those two are the actual takes, and then one of the other twos is also a fake take. So 3 out of 4 people are actually in favor of the time rules.
That it's either Joseph.
That is not
or
the world we
Gage,
live
but
in right now. I don't believe that.
I'm more leaning towards Joseph. Joseph definitely has those out there takes where he's just like, yeah, like this is completely fine. I mean, heck, the guy says that playing Flu this format is skillful. Like, it's definitely like a silly thing.
Totally agree.
That
Go
Joseph
play
would
Flu.
say.
Go play Flu. You will not win a YCS. You won't even be able to step foot in one.
That's not a skill
Bro, I
issue.
do
though.
play Flu. I literally have the deck. I've been playing it like against friends. I played against Gabe Vargas and I 2-0'd him, and then he was playing Ishizu.
Those are not friends, by the way. If you're having a friendly match and you're playing Flunder, they're not real friends.
Here,
Gabe could not win a YCS this year. Like, literally could not.
he's bad.
Man, Kevin is associating with all these band players. Like, what's going on?
Interesting.
All these one by the way. All these equals 1.
Hey,
I
plus
got
you, that's 2, man. That's more than there is in this conversation.
So okay, when I go take a piss, that's me associating with a band player. Is that what's going on?
I'm canceling your toilet right now.
Yeah, I have another thing that Joseph brought up that it's like actually kind of intriguing. I wonder what you guys think about it. He said like, Joseph, you like cards that actually have like a cost now attributed to them. That
Yes.
that involves life points, right? So like cards like Sprite Starter and stuff like that, like you actually feel like you're paying for them. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more for the people?
Yeah, so life points don't matter. With the exception of time rules, life points are just this weird resource that doesn't matter because every single deck OTKs. That means that a bunch of cards that like decrease your life points, really powerful answers like Solemn Judgment, Cosmic Cyclone, and really powerful starter cards like Sprite Starter essentially don't have a cost associated with them. I like that in some game states, they secretly do. It makes them feel just very slightly more balanced.
Don't you think that you could still have those costs be meaningful and impact?
I can get behind that point. Like I do agree that like life points matter way less than they should in Yu-Gi-Oh, and I personally don't share that opinion that it's like a good part of the time rules, but I can understand why someone would say that they like that they sometimes matter in that way. You know what I mean?
If we use the end of turn.
I'd argue they'd be even more meaningful if you went to end of next turn.
If I get a battle phase, it doesn't matter that I took 11 off Sprite Starter. I'm going to do 10 million to you.
Oh,
I don't know about that.
I
Okay,
don't know.
maybe
It
not
depends.
Sprite Starter because that deck is terrible.
With the time rules
hey.
the way they are right now, if you activate Solemn Judgment, it's not like, oh, this card now has a significant cost. It's, oh, I lost the game. Your card's cost should not be activate this card, lose the duel. Like, that should not be the effect of your card.
Also a
I
fair
think
point.
they should. I think powerful cards should.
He's the
have
imposter.
Huge costs associated.
There's no way.
I'm super suspicious of Joseph.
There is no way you're gonna tell me the activation cost.
I'm
of
sorry
your card
that
should
you
be
don't
lose the
understand
duel.
like general game design principles. That's not my fault.
Oh my god.
I have my guess. Does everyone else have their guess?
I definitely.
This is
have
not
my
long
guess.
enough. They
I
just
have my guess
started.
Too, if we're just ready to hawk.
All
to
right,
it.
let's write them down.
Oh,
on
shit,
this
I need to
piece
go
of
get
paper,
paper.
and then
One
we'll
sec.
pull them up on 3. Oh, all that bullshit about 8 by 11 and you didn't get one.
So Joseph, how do you feel about the word sussy ending in ussy?
That's great. All right, it is time to vote. Who do we think has the fake take? Ready? 3.
Okay, I'm saying. Is it Gage or MBT? I'm saying it's MBT.
2, 1.
Oh man, I should have used a marker. You can't even read.
Who is it?
That's right, folks. There is not an imposter on this first episode. I know it doesn't make sense for us to, ignore the core conceit of the thing in the very premiere episode, but I did want you all to get kind of a baseline of how our argumentative styles work so you can play along with us next time. And I hope to see you there next week.
God.
All right,
I-
we're literally
yo,
just
wait,
lying
that's-
out here.
that's
We're just
pre-
lying.
that's a pretty-
We're literally
yo.
just lying.
I've been betrayed. I've been betrayed. I've never felt so let down at any point in my life. God damn. Bro, you know what this means? You know what this means? When you know what's even worse about this is that that's actually his take. That's actually his take. Okay. Let me digest this. Okay, so Coder said, "Fuck the time rules. They're terrible." Okay. Nadir says the time rules are like okay-ish at locals and regionals levels because they're not that serious, but they suck at YCSs. Okay, I can get behind that too. MBT says, yeah, time rules, best thing in the world. Very funny, Ladybug. Haha, that's why it's very good. Also, Sprite Starter should lose you the game. And Gage said, what exactly? What was Gage's take? Of like, they're like, okay?
Dan, good luck. That's
This
what I
is-
gotta say. Good.
This is definitely the funniest fucking thing that has happened.
Okay, so are
Ever.
we done then? Are we done?
Okay, no, I enjoyed that. Gage was kind of okay with the time rules. Okay, so I'm gonna tell you before we move on. I want to give my own little 20 cents on the video on the topic of time rules. And I mean, once again, keep in mind that my take on this is basically super
matches have been-
super
I think for
from a hyper competitive perspective, right? Like I can understand if someone who's playing the game in a different fashion has a different take on things. Keep that in mind always. My personal take on the time rules is that they are actually, I don't think they are great. But I also think they could be much, much worse. And they do a lot of things correctly, which I specifically don't have a problem, or I don't really have a problem with cards that are being played specifically for time. Like a card like your freaking Ladybug or your Scattershot or whatever, or your Resonator and whatnot. I personally don't think those are the biggest problem with the time rules. And I'm going to tell you why I don't think that's the case. Because you have to ask yourself, what is the purpose? What is the purpose of time rules in Yu-Gi-Oh, right? What are they trying to achieve with the time rules, right? The goal of the time rules is to basically stop the game or make it stop relatively quickly after time has been called and try to declare a winner in a way where you try and figure out who was going to win the game if there was no time rule, right? That is the goal of the time rules, right? Is to basically, it's a shortcut towards the end of the match, and you have to try and think, okay, how do I determine who would have won the game if we had played it out normally? And you can never do that perfectly, right? You can never do that perfectly in a reasonable way, because the only way to always find the person that would have won the game if they had it played normally is to have it play out normally, which that is not an option. It has to end sooner than that. You know what I mean? So you will always have some margin of error when deciding a winner early, right? There will always be some percentage of games where the time rules declare someone the winner of the game that maybe wouldn't have won the game otherwise, right? That is something that you cannot avoid completely, right? So what we should be trying to do is we should try to declare that person the winner that was like at a decently good success rate. Basically, we should try and like avoid declaring the person the winner that probably would have not won the game. So I think that, and hear me out. My take is that specifically cards that increase or decrease life points, like the Ladybug or whatnot, are not the biggest problem with the time rules, because let me put it that way. If I'm going first and we go into time and I get to pull off my full combo into search a one-off side-decked card, I'm arguing that I'm winning that game most of the time anyways, right? Like if I'm going first with Sprite and I'm going to do full combo and then resolve my gigantic Sprite at the end of the full combo, I'm probably winning that game anyways if there's no time, right? Not always. Of course, there's cards like Dark Ruler No More that could make it like closer and whatnot, but in the grand scheme of things, I'm probably winning that game, right? If I go first. If I go first with Tearlaments and I mill my entire deck and I hit a freaking Ladybug of all things, I'm probably winning the game too, right? If we're being honest, right? The win rate going first is pretty good in Yu-Gi-Oh! So the person going first, accessing their one-off side deck card, is probably winning the game, right? The Tearlament player going first, doing all their combos, and then resolving a Sprite sprint is probably winning the game in a no timeout scenario as well, right? Not always, but more often than not. And that's specifically why I don't think those time cards are a problem. Or a huge problem, I should say. What I have, on the other hand, what I have a bigger problem with is just some games ending in the middle of it. Like basically, there's games where time is called, or where people enter game 3 with like 2 minutes left, right? We all know that feeling of like most of us should know that feeling in like a tournament where the clock is down to 2 minutes and then you're going into game 3 and you're not going to get a turn and they're going to get some life points and it feels bad, but at the end of the day, if they get to go first in game 3, they are more likely to win than if I'm going second, right? They are more likely to win in Yu-Gi-Oh! That's just how current Yu-Gi-Oh! Is. The player going first is more likely to win, so the time rules declaring the player going first as the winner because they play a card for it is not actually that big of a deal. You know what I mean? Do you know what do we understand that? Do you get my point? I'm not saying it's ideal. I'm not saying it always declares the right person the winner. But what I'm saying is the person going first 2 minutes before time is more likely to win anyways. So it's not that bad, not that big of a deal. in that specific situation, which means that like cards like Ladybug, cards like Scattershot, cards like Red Resonator, I don't think they are the biggest problem. They feel bad to lose against. I don't like playing against these cards. It feels bad. But if you're realistic, like if you're going second and your opponent pulls off a full Sprite combo on you, you're probably losing, right? I lost going second. That I'm not saying that. That's exactly what I said. Like literally 30 seconds ago. It is not perfect. Of course, you don't have a 0% chance of winning going second. Of course not. But at this point, what do you want from the time rules? The time rules have to do this in some way, shape, or form. They have to abbreviate the game to a point where it ends earlier than it would have ended. So you have to declare someone the winner that maybe would have not won otherwise. That maybe would not have won otherwise. But I think that's okay. We will talk about what other options there are, because while what I will say right off the bat, what I will say is while I don't think the current time rules are awful, I think they could hypothetically be better, right? And that's something I want to get to. Now, I think it's more of a problem if you have a game 2 that goes really, really long and just goes into time. Or when you have a game 3 that starts with like 15 minutes left or 10 minutes left, where it's too early to use cards like freaking Scattershot or Ladybug or Resonator, but they still have a very high chance of going into time, but ending in a very, very weird fashion where someone just attacks over like a Sprite Elf for 500 damage and then randomly wins the game because of that. I think that's weird. I think that situation is very, very weird. I think that's a much bigger problem than the one where it ends with the player going first winning, right? I think the player going first in time just winning is not a big issue. I think the games that are in the middle, in a heated back and forth, or like, you know, player going second trying to play into a board and it takes a bit of time, and then those games going into time, I think is where it becomes a little bit of a problem, because those are the games where if you're in the middle of the game and you look at the boards and it's like, okay, they both have a little bit of things going on, but one player has 7,500 life points and the other player has 8,000 life points. I think my argument in that situation is that in that spot, you cannot say who is more likely to win based off of life points, right? In that situation, if it's a back and forth game, the life points don't matter in Yu-Gi-Oh! And that's why I think the life points are a bad way to calculate who's winning, right? The problem is I think that in modern Yu-Gi-Oh, going back to an older style of rule where you let them play out one more turn each, or even like you count from 0 to 3 or whatever, I think that's unreasonable, simply because that would basically mean playing the entire game to a finish, right? That basically would be like playing without a time limit, because most of the time, let's be realistic here, a Yu-Gi-Oh match nowadays doesn't take 4 turns anymore most of the time. So the old time rules were also not really suitable anymore because they just basically didn't mean anything. And so I think that somewhere between turn ends after the current phase and we need to give them more turns, I think there is a better solution in the middle. I don't think necessarily that it has basically something to do with how much longer the game goes. I think it's more so that they should maybe consider taking a different variable into account when deciding who wins, right? I'm saying life points should not be the one that they look at. Like, for example, I think one idea that I had, I don't know if we talked about this recently. I think that this is one thing that they do, I believe, in Pokemon, and might also be the case in Magic, is that if they don't have a clear winner, by the end of time, they simply call it a draw. It doesn't matter who has more life points in Magic. It doesn't matter who has more or less prize cards left in Pokemon. If the game is not over, it's a draw, right? Clear winner, attacking for game. And so what my suggestion would be, and I've thought about this for a decent amount of time, is let the current player play out their turn. Let the player that currently has a turn play out his turn, and if he can reduce the opponent's life points to 0, or if any player can reduce the opponent's life points to 0, they win. And if no player goes down to 0 life points, it should be a draw, in my opinion. I don't think you should be winning because you attack over a freaking Sprite Elf for 500 damage. I don't think you should be losing because you've activated a Sprite Starter. I don't think you should be, like, losing because you had to Solemn Judgment a Lightning Storm. I think those are games that are very open for both players to still win, right? What about Top Cut? Top Cut already has different time rules. Top Cut already has extra turns if there's no clear winner by the time rules. We could just do the same thing. The amount of draws in the tier mirror would be insane. Well, then let it be like that. Who cares? Then you get a couple of draws. Then there's more draws in general, right? But then a draw is not that bad. If many other players get a draw as well, maybe that's one of the drawbacks of playing tier limits then, right? Right now, you can't play Dynamorphia as well because of the current time rules. Like, the time rules are always going to have an impact on how the game is being played, right? The current time rules have a negative impact for Sprite because that deck cannot gain life points, and it has Starter, right? And they have a positive impact for decks like Sky Striker, right? I personally feel like having 100 more life points or having a couple less life points than your opponent is very indicative of who is going to win the game, and that's why I think you have to come up with a different metric. Basically, you have to come up with a different method of declaring the winner, or just call it a draw. That is my take. That is my take. Essentially, is don't mess around with, oh, you get 1 turn, you get 2 turns, you get a battle phase, you get 4 turns. No, that doesn't fix anything. The core problem is that life points are not the deciding factor in Yu-Gi-Oh anymore. Life points are simply not the deciding factor anymore. And they shouldn't be taken into consideration when deciding the winner in time. That is my couple cents. I hope you understood or I hope you can get behind why I think that way. And it would literally save so much time, and I think it would also not encourage as much sharking or whatever that people often have negative experiences with at big tournaments, or sometimes. It simply doesn't exist that much because at the end of the day, a draw is something that can feel okay for both players, and there's really not that much going on in terms of like what is it going to do for you that you stall for like 30 seconds or whatnot if you just get like if you have to win the game on the spot anyways. Well, okay. Enough of that. I personally don't have a huge problems with the current time rule anyways. Like, every once in a while it sucks to lose by them. It happens. But I think you have to realize that is always going to happen with how the time rules go. Because simply said, like I said earlier, the time rules are here to declare a winner early, and that is always going to have a certain chance to declare the wrong person the winner, no matter how you do it. No matter how you do it, even with 3 extra turns, you can sit there after 3 extra turns and have the most insane hand, and you can come back next turn, but the time rules don't give you an extra turn. Also feels bad, right? There's always a feel bad situation when time rules are involved. You don't get rid of that. You know, that's what you always think it's better if it changes in this or that direction. At the end of the day, you're going to have games where you have more life points than your opponent on the first turn, but then 3 turns later, suddenly you have 1,000 life points less, but next turn you would definitely win, and then it feels super bad. But yeah. The thing I'd love to change for the time rules is end of turn instead end of phase. Like, the last 2 weeks, my only losses were because of time and only because it was end of phase and not end of turn. It happens.